Do not buy a used 3 Series BMW until you watch this video. Today, I'm going to tell you all the things that the dealer won't, including one huge issue that could potentially burn down your house or even worse. Right now, there is a ton of 2021 through 2022 BMW 3 Series that are hitting the used market, and that's because the 3-year leases that started during the pandemic car boom are ending right now, which means there's a lot of clean, low-mile G20s sitting on dealer lots at prices that are starting to finally make sense. But here's the problem. This generation, it has a starter motor recall that's tied to an actual fire risk, an engine that some owners are finding out the hard way has a plastic part that was never supposed to be plastic, and a transmission BMW tells you does not need service. So before you sign anything, I'm going to walk you through exactly what to look for, what to avoid, and what pretty much no dealer is going to tell you when you walk in. So let's get right into it. So if you're new here, I'm DC5 James. I cover all things automotive, for the most part pertaining to Japanese and German cars, including latest news, recalls, and DIYs as well. So if that's your thing, the subscribe button is right there. Hit it, hit the like, you know what to do. So here's what we're going to cover in this video. We're going to talk about the engine debate with the 4-cylinder B58 versus the 6-cylinder B58, the oil pump issue that you guys keep asking me about in the comments. We're going to talk about the starter motor recall with the fire risk, what it actually covers, and what to check on the car that you're looking at. We're also going to talk about maintenance, particularly about coolant loss and the transmission service that BMW says you don't need, but you actually do. And we're also going to talk about the tech side of things with the iDrive 7 to the iDrive 8 and whether you should hunt for the older interior with the actual buttons versus the newer one. Let's start with the question that I get asked the most. Every G20 that you look at runs on one of two engines, and which one you pick changes the ownership experience more than pretty much anything else on these cars. First off, we have the 330i, which has the B58 2.0 liter turbo 4-cylinder. This is the one that most G20s on the used market will have because it's also the one that depreciates the fastest. The B58 has actually been a pretty solid engine in this gen. It's a mature design BMW has been refining since 2015. The known weak points on these are the timing chain guides on the earlier versions, although this was mostly an issue on older B48 applications and not so much the G20 specific tune. The valve cover and oil filter housing gasket leaks, which is like common on pretty much any BMW these days. They're cheap to fix, not really a deal breaker. Another thing to look out for is carbon buildup on the intake valves, which is just a byproduct of direct injection, and basically any modern turbo engine, BMW included, is going to have that. If you want the cheapest, most predictable ownership experience in this generation, the 330i is genuinely a reasonable choice. It's not the most exciting car, but it's not going to bankrupt you either, and it is pretty reliable. Now let's talk about the M340i. This is the one everybody wants, and for good reason. It has the smoother, faster, and better sounding B58, and it really does have the reputation as one of BMW's best modern engines, but there is a plastic oil pump issue on these. On B58 engines built roughly between 2018 and 2022, BMW used an oil pump with an internal plastic component that regulates the oil pressure. Now, under certain conditions, particularly extreme cold starts or running the wrong oil viscosity, that plastic ring can crack or become brittle. Now, you're not always going to get a warning when that fails. You kind of have to know what symptoms to look for. There may be an oil pressure warning light, and the engine may go into limp mode. In a worst case scenario, you could have sudden internal engine damage. Here's the important thing about this. BMW quietly redesigned this part with a metal internal component starting around 2022. So if you're looking at a later build M340i, it's less of a concern. But if you're looking at a 2020 or a 2021, it's something that you should specifically ask the seller about, but it definitely is worth checking before you buy. So to be clear on this, there is no official safety recall for this specific issue. It's documented through owner reports, independent shops, and if you're a car nerd like me that digs through internet car forums, you'll see many reports of this issue, but There is no formal NHTSA campaign, so that means a dealer is under zero obligation to tell you about it, and most will not. So here's my take. The M340i is still the better driving experience, and most of these engines are fine, but if you're buying one, maybe just kind of budget mentally for the possibility of an oil pump inspection or replacement down the line, and never ever let anyone put anything other than the specified 0W20 oil in it, thinking a thicker oil is safer. It actually adds more stress to that plastic component, not less. As always, I always recommend liquid moly oil. It really is the best. I made videos about it, and you can even get pretty much free oil changes. I will link my video about that in the description below. Moving on, now let's talk about the starter motor recall. And I covered this detail in my last recall video, and it's important enough that I want to walk through it again specifically for buyers here on this one, because this is exactly the kind of thing that can get lost between a private seller and a new owner. BMW has issued multiple waves of recalls tied to the starter motor on 3 Series models, and these campaigns specifically covered 2021 through 2024 3 Series vehicles, among other BMW models sharing the same starter supplier components. Here's the actual mechanism. Wear on an internal component of the starter motor can cause it to overheat. In rare but documented cases, that overheating has led to an actual thermal event, meaning a fire. And the unsettling part is that in some cases, this can happen hours after the car has already been parked and shut off, not just while you're starting it. BMW's own guidance to owners under this recall has been to park outside away from structures until the repair is completed. That's how seriously this is being treated. So here's what this means for you as a buyer. Before you commit to anything, get the VIN, not just after you put down a deposit, and run it through nhtsa.gov/recalls. It takes like 30 seconds, and it tells you immediately if there's an open recall on that specific car. You can also ask directly, has this recall been completed, and do you have the paperwork? A legitimate dealer will have service records showing the starter replacement. A private seller might not even know about it. If this recall hasn't been completed yet, that's not necessarily a deal breaker. BMW is replacing the starter for free, but you want to know going in and ideally get it scheduled before you take ownership of that car. Now let's talk about maintenance on these cars. First off, we have coolant loss. Some G20 owners across both engine variants, although it shows up a bit more on the higher mileage cars, report a slow coolant loss issue without an obvious external leak. Usually this traces back to one of a few common culprits on these modern BMW engines. First off, the plastic coolant expansion tank, which can develop hairline cracks over time, especially in cars that have seen big temperature swings. There's also water pump seals, which on BMW's electric water pump tend to be a when, not if situation, especially around the 60 to 100,000 mile range. And also the hose connections with their quick disconnect fittings, which BMW uses extensively. And these tend to weep slowly without throwing an obvious puddle on your driveway. So practical advice on this, don't just check the coolant level once at purchase and call it good. Check it again after a week or two of normal driving, and it's dropped it all with no puddle underneath the car. That's pretty much your sign to get a pressure test on before it becomes a bigger problem. Coolant loss that goes unnoticed long enough can lead to overheating, and overheating on a turbocharged engine is a much more expensive conversation than replacing something like an expansion tank. Next, let's talk about the ZF8 transmission. This is one of the most important things I can tell you in this entire video, and it applies whether you're buying a 330i, an M340i. Both of these use the ZF8 HP 8-speed automatic transmission. These are excellent transmissions, but you need to maintain them. BMW's official position is that this transmission has a lifetime fill fluid that never needs to be changed. Lifetime in BMW's language generally means the lifetime of the original warranty period, not the lifetime of the car. Independent transmission shops, even some BMW techs off the record, will tell you the ZF8 holds up dramatically better with a fluid and filter service somewhere in the 60,000 to 100,000 mile range, and then again every 60,000 miles or so after that. So if you're buying a used G20 with no record of a transmission service and it's already past 60,000 miles, it's not really a reason to walk away, but it is a maintenance item that you should plan for and, quite frankly, a decent negotiating point on the price. Now let's talk about the tech and the interior, specifically the iDrive 7 versus iDrive 8. And this is where the used market really splits into two different areas, and it's a bigger decision than most buyers realize going in. See, the original G20 launched with iDrive 7, which is a conventional gauge cluster plus a separate angled center touchscreen. And this is controlled by a rotary dial, touch, or voice commands. Now, critically, these cars kept physical climate controls, actual buttons, and a small status screen for your AC and temperature. Your climate control is not buried in the touchscreen menu. Now, in 2022, BMW introduced the facelifted, or LCI, which stands for Life Cycle Impulse, version of the G20 for the 2023 model year. The headline change is the BMW curved display. It has a 12.3-inch digital instrument cluster merged seamlessly with a 14.9-inch central touchscreen. Now, this is running BMW's operating system 8. It looks fantastic in photos and even better in person. I mean, the showroom appeal on this is genuinely off the charts, but there is a trade-off nobody tells you about at the dealership. The physical climate control buttons are gone. The temperature, fan speed, seat heating, most of it now lives inside the touchscreen in a permanent control bar. But it's still a touchscreen interaction instead of an actual tactile button one. So which one should you actually buy? If you're the kind of driver who wants to glance down and adjust your seat heat by feel without taking your eyes off the road for an extra second, the pre-LCI car with physical buttons is genuinely worth hunting for, and it's one of the few cases in the used market where the older interior is actually more functional than the newer one. Now, if you want the most modern tech experience, faster software, and a noticeably nicer voice assistant, if you don't mind touch-based climate controls, the 2023 and up LCI is the better long-term tech platform. BMW is going to keep pushing updates to iDrive 8 long after iDrive 7 stops getting meaningful support. Now, there's no wrong answer here. It genuinely comes down to whether you prioritize buttons or whether you prioritize having the latest software. So let's bring this all together. Before you buy a used G20, first off, decide between the 4-cylinder versus the 6-cylinder based on your budget and priorities. It's an M340i built between 2018 and 2022. You can ask specifically about the oil pump to see if it has the newer part, and run the VIN on nhtsa.gov/recalls before you commit. Confirm about the starter recall status. Also, as we talked about, you're going to want to monitor the coolant level over more than one check. Don't just trust a single glance. And also ask about the transmission service records. If one hasn't been done for 60,000 miles, I would put that in your budget. Lastly, decide if you want the physical climate buttons, which is pre-2023, or the curved display tech platform, which is 2023 and above. So if you do all these 6 things, you're going to walk into this purchase with a lot more knowledge than most people, and you're in a better position at the dealer. So hopefully you guys find this video helpful. If it did, make sure you drop a like and feel free to comment down below. I try to respond to every single comment that people leave. I'm DC5 James, and I will see you on the next video. Peace.